Jaws. You're aware of this film's existence, even if you've never seen it, even if you don't like it. You are more than well aware of the cinematic footprint it has left on moviegoers. Film reviews, pointless sequels, endless parodies, our perceptions of sharks, for better or worse, and entire generations that think twice before taking a dip in the big drink. It has also given birth to the summer blockbuster, that time in the middle of the year where high concept films rule and some say oversaturate a very lucrative market. In the decades that have followed the release of Jaws, there have been more than a few films that have rivaled and even eclipsed the 1975 movie in sheer spectacle. But in spite of this, Jaws has held its own among them and is still widely considered a classic of American cinema, the greatest film of all time, a truly unforgettable movie. Then in the year 2020, its 45th anniversary, something happened to Jaws. It became more than unforgettable. It had become relevant. Around December 31st, 2019, in Wuhan, China, a viral outbreak had occurred. Outbreaks in developing nations were hardly newsworthy, and the last viral outbreak in China, SARS, had become something of a distant memory, a dynamite stick that never went off. This skepticism led to complacency. For the rest of the world, it was just business as usual. A blip on the radar for the last year of a clustered decade. The calm before the storm. The first cases of what would later be called COVID-19, or coronavirus, hit the shores of the US in early 2020. The first official case in the States, according to the CDC, was January 21st. In the subsequent months that followed, national quarantine had taken effect. Panic buying ensued, small businesses were forced to close, entire states in lockdown. Unemployment skyrocketed. The skepticism was gone, but some states tried to soldier on regardless, the most obvious being my very own home state of Texas. The lockdown being lifted was only ever supposed to be a temporary measure of relief. The effects of this virus cannot be overstated. Businesses closed, others stunted, theater chains becoming obsolete in the wake of streaming, and some have argued it gutted the Trump administration and destroyed his chances of being reelected. As of recording this video, the US is still struggling to fight this virus and restore its intricate infrastructure. Even with rumors of a vaccine being prepped, the effects of the virus have already set off ripples that will shape the upcoming decade. So, what does COVID-19 have to do with a 45-year-old film about a giant fish terrorizing a community? Jaws is not an overly complicated movie. In fact, the genius of the film lies in its simplicity. But that's not to say that the film doesn't have themes or motifs. To name a few, how the everyman deals with the extraordinary, small town attitudes towards intellectualism, education versus experience, PTSD, and the most obvious, man versus nature. But in my opinion, the most interesting and relevant theme is the prioritization of profit over people. To give a quick synopsis, in the movie, a young woman is devoured by a shark. Her remains are washed on the beach, and Amity Island's Chief Brody is convinced a great white was the culprit. The mayor, on the other hand, is not convinced at all. He is more worried about the island's fledgling economy being demolished by closed beaches. Even after earlier skepticism is destroyed by a little boy's death, the mayor still believes money is second to none, and both he and the town are looking for an easy solution. The desire for the problem to disappear leads the town to prematurely celebrate the demise of their aquatic adversary. Meanwhile, the real threat still hovers over the town like an angel of death. If this scenario is starting to sound familiar at all, then you understand the relevancy. Jaws' ties to critiques of capitalism are hardly new. In a May 11, 2010 article by Stephen Baker called What Jaws Can Teach Us About Our Present Economic Crisis, the author pointed out some familiar themes. When the business people of Amity Island, led by the personamous Mayor Larry Vaughn, find that their profitable little holiday resort is confronted by a deadly threat in the waters around them, they bury their heads in the sand, putting profit before people. They ignore the warnings of marine expert Matt Hooper and police chief Martin Brody's intuition and keep Amity's beaches open over the lucrative 4th of July holiday, presenting the killer with a smorgasbord of tasty bathers. Through this contradiction, Amity's commercial interests and Brody's duty to protect the broader community, Jaws plays out the dichotomy of private enterprise versus public service, and comes down very firmly on the side of public service. Mayor Vaughn and his cronies eventually concede the need to take action, but even then it is a mixture of political expedience and commercial self-interest that seems to move them. End quote. The context of this article is written in the wake of the 2008 recession, but has even more precedence now than it did over 10 years ago. Our current handling of the coronavirus outbreak, or more specifically, how our government handled it, is the worst case example of life imitating art. After the viral outbreak had punctured the barrier of skepticism, quick solutions were heavily sought after to salvage the year. Lockdowns to slow the second wave, that incidentally not all states agreed to, mandatory mask wearing, social distancing, anything to make the problem go away so that business and commerce could resume. States that were more lenient had their second shark attack, their second wave of viral outbreaks much sooner than others. Much like the death of Alex Kintner, the deaths of people that had contracted COVID were trivialized, treated as a temporary obstacle or inconvenience, a one-off that wouldn't affect the majority. The parallel between our current year and Jaws becomes even less obscure and all the more unsettling. Lee Fierro, better known to film buffs as Mrs. Kintner, mother of the second shark victim in Jaws, died on April 5, 2020, at the age of 91 due to complications from COVID. Just like her film counterpart, her sense of safety and well-being was compromised by the very authority figures that were supposed to keep her safe.
Did you let people go swimming anyway?
Even down to the infamous stimulus checks, the bailout of the mega corporations dwarfed a flimsy $1,200 the American people were supposed to be relieved by. Profit leads before people, as usual. The actual solutions aren't, for lack of a better term, immune to a dollar sign. In the film, seasoned shark hunter Quint offers a solution for a price.
I'll find him for 3, but I'll catch him and kill him for 10.
No doubt the inevitable vaccine will have a price tag attached to it. Though there is a whole separate conversation about socialized healthcare, I still believe it helps illustrate some priority our society places on the bottom line. One of the more pivotal moments in the film occur after the 4th of July attacks. The mayor has been humiliated and his credibility ruined. The most telling line in the scene is following.
My kids were on that beach trip.
Not until the crisis affected him did he truly take it seriously. This was demonstrated when Trump supporters, members of Trump's cabinet, and even Trump himself contracted the virus. The virus didn't care about its skeptics, what side of the political aisle they were on, or what they had planned. It came for them just the same. The reality of nature's indifference to mankind was something COVID skeptics found out too late. Much like Amity Island, America's sense of security and confidence in our leaders has been undermined, and even with the arrival of a new administration around the corner, the well of faith of the American people is mere droplets. That isn't to say the parallels between Jaws and the year 2020 are perfect. For starters, Anthony Fauci, who would be a stand-in for Matt Hooper, has constantly moved the goalposts for when it will be safe to come out of lockdowns. Some have said that the lockdowns may be a permanent affair. Others suggest that there's more insidious reasons behind these current lockdowns and that they are merely the destruction of our freedoms, or at the very least, a precursor to the destruction of our freedoms. Some have said that Trump's incompetency will be eclipsed by a president even more incompetent and senile, but that remains to be seen. I think it's fair to say there has been a severe failing in both the private and public sector, and though constant skepticism hasn't done anyone favors, the skepticism of nanny-state solutions was not formed in a vacuum. The Patriot Act saw to that. Another difference from Jaws is that there is no finality to the scenario. No exploding tanks or swell of music, no real resolution. This is a problem that has shaped the course of an entire planet and will no doubt lead to more challenges along the way. Jaws launched the career of the most imaginative and prolific director of the 20th century, turning Steven Spielberg into a household name overnight. It is widely considered one of the greatest films of all time, finding itself in such pristine company as The Godfather, Citizen Kane, and The Shawshank Redemption. It has earned its stripes as a truly unforgettable piece of cinematic pop culture. But the last thing Jaws should ever be is irrelevant.